It was a night designed to dazzle, a high society charity gala in the heart of New York City, where chandeliers glistened like constellations and the air shimmered with anticipation. Held at the Metropolitan Grand Hall, the event boasted a guest list that read like a roll call of the global elite. Celebrities, tech billionaires, royalty, and world leaders gathered under one roof. But amid the golden table settings and polished tuxedos, no one expected the silence that would fall when two men, each a symbol of very different kinds of power, stood face to face. As the MC's voice introduced Pope Leo XIV, the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras zoomed in. Here was a pontiff celebrated for his humility and courage, who'd walked barefoot in refugee camps and washed the feet of prisoners. Tonight, he stood beneath crystal chandeliers, flanked by Secret Service and Swiss guards, offering blessings to those in need. He smiled, waved softly, then took his seat. Moments later, a familiar figure entered, the unmistakable presence of Donald J. Trump. Clad in a sharp black suit, with his signature red tie, he drew attention with every stride. Though no longer in office, his influence remained undeniable. He moved with calculated purpose, stopping to shake hands, pose for photos, and bask in adulation. The two men had never met in person, only exchanged words through media jabs and diplomatic intermediaries. But tonight, fate placed them at the same table. As Trump approached the head table, anticipation tightened the room like a taut wire. He smiled broadly, reached out a hand to the Pope. Time seemed to slow. The cameras flashed, every breath held. Then, it happened. Pope Leo XIV simply looked into Trump's eyes, folded his hands before him, and offered a gentle nod, without extending his own hand. The gesture was quiet, restrained but unmistakably deliberate. A ripple passed through the room, gasps, nervous laughter, a few claps, hesitant, from a distant corner. Trump, to his credit, maintained composure. His hand paused mid-air, then adjusted his cuff and took a sip from a nearby glass. A polite smile masked 1,000 thoughts behind his eyes. Before we uncover what really happened and why this moment became one of the most talked about events in recent history, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more jaw-dropping real-life stories like this one. The gala continued, but the atmosphere had shifted, conversations hushed. Eyes darted toward the Pope and Trump, reading their expressions, guessing at the tensions simmering beneath civility. Leo XIV returned to his meal, occasionally nodding to fellow guests, while Trump leaned toward a nearby ambassador, his jaw slightly clenched. No words exchanged between the two, not yet. The world would wake up to this moment. Headlines already began forming in the minds of journalists seated at the press table. Social media managers readied clips, while insiders whispered, "Did that really just happen?" What no one knew was that this simple refusal, a withheld handshake, was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a message, long contemplated, and deeply rooted in everything Pope Leo XIV stood for. Outside the gala, the streets buzzed with black limousines and camera flashes. But inside, one quiet moment had just altered the evening's purpose. It was no longer just about charity, luxury, or celebration. It was about meaning, about power, about a quiet man in white robes making a choice that would echo far beyond the polished floors of the Met Grand. And the world was watching. To understand the quiet but explosive moment between Pope Leo XIV and Donald Trump, one must first look behind the grandeur of the gala, into the hearts and histories of two men driven by vastly different convictions. Pope Leo XIV, born Alessandro Conti in a modest village outside Florence, was never meant for grandeur. His early years were marked by silence, books, and prayer. Long before the papal white robes, he walked barefoot through refugee camps and washed the feet of forgotten prisoners. As a cardinal, he gained a reputation for blunt moral clarity and an unwillingness to compromise with power, regardless of political consequence. From the pulpit, his homilies were fire disguised as silk. "We must not kneel before those who sell promises," he once said, drawing both reverence and ire. Some loved him, others feared what he represented, a mirror held to the faces of the powerful. Yet, he never wavered. Donald Trump, by contrast, built his legacy on dominance, branding, and spectacle. From skyscrapers to boardrooms to the Oval Office, his journey was one of relentless assertion. His post-presidency remained a calculated performance, carefully curated to maintain influence and secure legacy. When he accepted the Gala invitation, insiders claimed he saw an opportunity, not only to position himself among the global elite again, but to orchestrate a symbolic moment with the Pope himself. It wasn't the first time Trump had sought proximity to spiritual authority. During his term, he had posed with Bibles, hosted prayer breakfasts, and surrounded himself with advisors from various faiths. But this, an image shaking hands with the Pope, would be more than optics. It would be power captured in a single frame. Except, not everyone agreed. Weeks before the Gala, the Vatican received preliminary protocols for the event. Pope Leo's advisors were wary. The Gala, lavish in scale, conflicted with the Pope's recent messages against indulgence and performative charity. Behind closed doors, there were discussions. Should he attend? Should he speak? Should he meet Trump? Ultimately, the Pope agreed to appear, but with clear boundaries. A quiet directive was sent to the organizers. Pope Leo would not engage in political showmanship. No pre-arranged photos, no public greetings engineered for spectacle. These conditions were communicated, gently but firmly, to all key attendees, including Trump's team. The warning, however, was dismissed. A senior aide reportedly told the press off record, "The Pope wouldn't dare, it's too public." Trump, ever the showman, saw the moment as inevitable. Yet inside Vatican walls, Leo XIV stood unmoved. He knew what the cameras wouldn't see, what it meant to compromise principles for civility. In private, he confided in his secretary, "To remain silent when the truth must be whispered is to lie twice." Days before the Gala, the Pope gave a sermon in Rome. "It is better to be hated for truth than loved for flattery," he said, eyes scanning the crowded basilica. Those close to him knew the words weren't general doctrine, they were a prelude. Meanwhile, the media buzzed. Columnists speculated whether the Pope and Trump would reconcile. Talk shows predicted a handshake and mutual smiles. It all seemed choreographed in advance, until it wasn't. As the Gala approached, Vatican insiders grew tense. The Pope, calm as ever, packed only his prayer book and rosary. "A man must carry peace in his pocket," he said to his driver before boarding the flight. And so, as the world waited for a meeting of giants, one man prepared for diplomacy, the other for confrontation. Only one would get what he wanted. The moment began with the shuffle of polished shoes and the glint of camera flashes. Donald Trump, having worked the room with his practiced charm, made his way toward the head table. The crowd leaned forward, discreetly, yet in unison, as if history might unfold before them. Beside him, an aide whispered something, likely confirming the cameras were in place. Trump straightened his jacket, smoothed his tie, and took the final steps toward Pope Leo XIV. He extended his hand, smiling broadly, eyes focused directly on the Pope. The gesture was theatrical, meant to capture attention and freeze time. The room stilled, conversations halted, utensils stopped midair. Even the string quartet seemed to sense the gravity. And then, with quiet certainty, Pope Leo XIV looked up. Their eyes met, one gaze confident and calculating, the other calm and immovable. The Pope inclined his head in a gentle nod, hands folded before him, unmoved by the outstretched offer. He did not speak. He did not flinch. He simply chose not to move. The air thickened. Their collective breath was held, then broken by a wave of gasps, followed by stunned silence. It was not a dramatic rejection. It was something far more powerful. Restraint. The denial wasn't harsh. It was deliberate. Not a confrontation, but a statement. Trump, caught mid-gesture, paused for a beat. Then, with deft political instinct, he turned the moment into a pivot. He adjusted his cuff, smiled faintly, and took a step back, nodding as if nothing unusual had occurred. Nearby, aides began to murmur. The cameras didn't miss a second. Then came the words. The Pope leaned slightly toward Trump, not enough for most to hear. but just enough for a journalist positioned nearby. With his head still bowed, Leo XIV said in a voice meant only for one, "True peace does not court pride." The words, soft and solemn, were caught by a single open mic held by the press. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it was profound. Within minutes, that 7-word phrase began circulating on social media. A reporter tweeted the quote. Another uploaded the handshake footage or lack thereof. Major news outlets scrambled to verify. Hashtags emerged, the refusal, Pope vs Trump, true peace. The clip was watched 1 million times before the evening ended. By midnight, commentators debated its meaning on primetime television. Was it a snub, a moral stand, a papal critique of power or personality? Experts weighed in. Theologians quoted scripture. Political analysts dissected body language. Everyone, it seemed, had an opinion. Some hailed the Pope's words as a powerful rebuke of arrogance, interpreting pride as emblematic of Trump's political style. Others accused the Vatican of showmanship and disrespect, but no one could deny the impact. Trump's team issued a brief statement. President Trump was honored to attend the event and respects all leaders of faith. He remains committed to dialogue and charity. The message, clearly curated, attempted to smooth over what many now called a diplomatic earthquake. Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV said nothing further that night. He offered no press conference, no elaboration. His silence echoed louder than any podium could. What had started as a moment, meant for optics, became a symbol dissected by the world. The Pope's refusal was not just a gesture, it became a parable. And whether seen as an act of humility, resistance, or both, it resonated across continents. That one phrase, "True peace does not court pride," would appear in headlines, sermons, and even protest signs. Its simplicity was its weapon, and its timing made it unforgettable. By dawn, the digital storm had grown into a global thunderclap. News anchors around the world replayed the moment in loops, frame by frame, word by word. Opinion pieces flooded the internet. And from churches in Brazil to cafes in Berlin, people couldn't stop talking about the Pope's refusal and the 7 words that followed. Reactions were fierce and polarized. Supporters of Pope Leo XIV praised the gesture as a rare act of moral courage. Finally, one commentator wrote, a religious leader who remembers that faith is not a stage prop. Clerics in South America hailed the move as a reminder that the Church must never bow to temporal power. Youth groups across Europe adopted the phrase, "True peace does not court pride," as a slogan, printing it on shirts and banners. But not everyone was celebrating. In the United States, some saw the act as deeply inappropriate. "Whatever your personal views," a senator tweeted, "there's a time and place for everything." That was not it. Conservative pundits accused the Pope of theatrical self-righteousness. One host called it a calculated insult wrapped in holy robes. The Vatican offered no further statement, and that silence added fuel to the fire. Speculation filled the void. Was this personal, political, doctrinal? Behind the scenes, sources within the Church hinted at long-standing tension. Pope Leo had never publicly mentioned Donald Trump by name, but his past sermons had often included veiled critiques of nationalism, wealth worship, and populist rhetoric. "You can't love both gold and truth," he once said, to thunderous applause in St. Peter's Square. Some insiders revealed that the Pope had resisted previous invitations to meet Trump, even during his presidency. One cardinal, speaking anonymously, remarked, "This wasn't spontaneous, it was a line he drew a long time ago." Meanwhile, Trump didn't retreat. The next morning, he appeared on a talk show, claiming the incident was totally overblown, and that he and the Pope had different styles, sure, but great respect. He paused, smiled, then added, "I've always believed in peace, real peace, not the kind where you skip a handshake." But that wasn't the end of it. Later that day, he took to social media. In a post that quickly went viral, he wrote, "When people preach peace but can't even shake a hand, maybe it's not peace they're after. Maybe it's attention." It was a clear swipe, though cloaked in ambiguity. His supporters echoed the sentiment, while critics called it defensive spin. The divide deepened. Outside major cities, people began gathering. In front of Trump Tower, crowds waved banners, some praising the Pope, others defending Trump. Outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, demonstrators held vigils, reading aloud the Pope's words like scripture. Online, memes and parodies surged, blending politics with pop culture in a firestorm of satire. The incident even reached beyond politics and religion. Celebrities voiced opinions, artists painted murals, and musicians released tracks sampling the infamous quote. A jazz saxophonist in New Orleans released a piece titled "No Hand, Only Truth." Inside the church, the effects rippled in unexpected ways. Donations surged. Young people flooded local parishes, inspired by what they saw as authentic spiritual leadership. But among senior clergy, debates sparked. Some felt the Pope had gone too far. Others said he hadn't gone far enough. And as the dust began to settle, one thing became undeniable. A silent gesture had spoken louder than any speech. The conversation had shifted. It was no longer just about a snub. It had become a mirror, reflecting what people believed about pride, power, humility, and the cost of standing still when the world expects you to bow. 3 days after the gala, a letter surfaced, unsigned publicly, but instantly confirmed by the Vatican as authentic. It had been sent directly from Pope Leo XIV to Donald Trump. Handwritten in graceful Italian script, the translation swept across news outlets within hours. "Dear Mr. Trump," it began, "in moments of spectacle, one must decide whether to perform or to witness. I chose the latter." The letter didn't attack, nor flatter. It spoke with the precision of a scalpel, firm, measured, and reflective. It recounted no event directly, but emphasized principles: humility, dignity, and the quiet strength of restraint. Toward the end, it read, "True peace requires silence, not submission. And from silence, may God guide us both to understanding." The last line stood alone. "I pray for your heart as I do for mine." There was no rebuttal from Trump. His camp declined to comment. But later that evening, in a speech at a business forum in Miami, Trump veered from his teleprompter and said, "We don't always agree with others, but when people show conviction, even if it's the wrong kind, you have to at least admire the consistency." He chuckled. The audience laughed. Yet to some it felt like a concession, a rare moment of respect, cloaked in bravado. The following Sunday, Pope Leo XIV addressed the faithful in St. Peter's Square. His message was brief, but unmistakable. "To all leaders," he said, "those with power and those with platforms, if we kneel before pride, we cannot stand for truth. The world doesn't need more handshakes, it needs more hearts willing to be emptied." The words echoed. His approval ratings within the church soared, but more than that, his moral influence expanded. In a world hungry for clarity, one gesture had cut through the noise, and it hadn't come from anger, but from an unwavering stillness. The aftermath reshaped conversations in political circles, spiritual communities, and even classrooms. Ethics professors cited the event as a modern parable. Youth leaders hosted discussions on moral courage. The phrase "true peace does not court pride" entered public lexicon, engraved on protest signs, etched into digital art, and referenced in parliamentary debates. Yet, at its core, the story wasn't just about a pope or a president. It was about a choice. The choice to honor conviction over comfort, to refuse applause in favor of truth. Historians would later call it the moment dignity went viral. But for many, it remained simpler, a silent act that spoke to something we all recognize, even if we rarely name it: integrity. As the months passed, the memory didn't fade. It crystallized. The image of Trump's extended hand and the Pope's folded palms became iconic. Not because of conflict, but because of what it revealed. Two men, shaped by different truths, forced into a single moment of reckoning. And as we look back, we're reminded of what truly lingers after the cameras turn off. Not the gestures we perform for the world, but the ones we refuse to. So if this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge, inspire, and stir reflection. Don't miss what's coming next. And before you go, click the video on your screen now to discover the untold story of the Queen's secret meeting with Elon Musk. Trust us, you won't believe what happened behind those palace doors.